Hey, what's going on everybody? Z-Photo here and welcome back to another video. Today we are bringing you a very cool mod called Mahou Tsukai. I probably butchered that, but anyways, this mod adds a ton of cool new magic spells that you can perform to your Minecraft world. If you missed last week's video, link that down in the description below, and make sure you subscribe with notifications on so you don't miss any future uploads. As always, this video will be split up into multiple sections, and so the timestamps for those will be on the screen right now, as well as in the description below. If you would just like to go ahead and watch the video through normally, go ahead, it'll make complete sense. Now let's go ahead and get straight into the review. So the basics. You, the player, are now a magic user. You have a certain amount of mana, which shows in the top left as Mahou, X out of Y, where X is your current mana, and Y is your max mana storage. Every time you use 100 mana, your mana storage goes up by 1. You can also store mana in attuned gems. If you add an attuner to a diamond or emerald, then hold right click, you will put mana into it. This is a good way to store extra mana that you're not currently using, so that way you can build up even more than your current max storage. Your mana will regenerate slowly over time, and if you sleep, you'll get a good chunk of it back. If you're full hunger, it'll regen a little bit faster than if you're hungry. Now, to perform magic, you need a few things. The first of which, obviously, is mana. Then you need your own blood to draw a magic circle on the ground. And you also need 3 catalysts, which you add to the circle by right-clicking. And sometimes you need a cloth on the ground that will roll up your circle into a scroll. To draw a circle, take damage, and then use the hotkey, which is default M, to draw a circle in blood on the floor. There's also a dagger that you can make to stab yourself if you want. If the spell you're making needs a cloth, you put the cloth down first and then draw the circle on top. You add your catalyst and then you can right click the circle to pick up a scroll. So there are 7 catalysts where each one represents one of the known categories of magic. You take a hammer or a mortar and pestle and then smash the item up into a powdered catalyst and then add the powders to the blood circle you drew. Iron goes with boundaries, which deal with protective AoE effects centered on a circle. Ender goes with displacement, which are spells that deal with teleportation magic. Diamond goes with projection, which are spells that deal with weapon. Emerald goes with exchange, which are spells that usually involve a trade of some sort, which often refunds or generates mana. Gold goes with Mystic, which are unique spells that are often offensive and they provide miscellaneous effects. Quartz goes with Intelligence, which typically deal with decision making, which are often revolve around entities. Ender Eye goes with Mystic, which revolve around sight, and then secret spells fall into none of the categories. So in this video we're going to go over all of the categories and all of the possible spells, as well as all the items and stuff that the mod adds. So first off, we have boundaries. The cloth is optional for all the boundary spells. Our first boundary is the alarm boundary, which lets you know when something enters your boundary. Next is the enclosure boundary, which is for people too lazy to build bases. It'll rise up a wall around you. It doesn't look very pretty, but it definitely gets the job done. Next is the tangible boundary, which is an invisible barrier that lets you pass through but nothing else. So this is good for keeping things trapped inside of a boundary or keeping hostile mobs away from you. Then we have a displacement boundary, which teleports things from one side of the boundary to another. Next is the gravity boundary, which increases the gravity within the boundary for everyone except for the caster. And then finally we have the boundary of drain life, which turns the health of nearby things into health, fullness, and mana for you. This has a high mana cost. Our next category of spells is displacement. First displacement spell is Ascension, which the cloth is not required for, and it'll teleport you to the surface. Without a cloth, it'll teleport anyone who steps on it to the surface, and each teleport costs mana. Then we have protective displacement, which does require a cloth, and makes it so that anytime a projectile gets close to hitting you, you teleport away, and you won't get hit just like an Enderman does. Then we have projectile displacement, which once again requires a cloth, and it'll teleport you to the last arrow you shot, if it still exists. Then we have order displacement, which doesn't need a cloth. It teleports you to a nearby order displacement circle in the order they are placed. If there's no circle placed after, it will loop around to the oldest one. It has a short delay so that you can get off the ride if you so desire. Then we have equivalent displacement, which doesn't need a cloth, and it can teleport things a long distance between 2 circles if both chunks are loaded and there's something on each circle. It can be a mob or a dropped item. The things or people or mobs on each circle will swap places. use shift right click to bind two circles together. Then we have mental displacement, which does require a cloth, and it will give you astral projection with a range of 20 blocks. To get out of it, simply go out of the range and you'll be back inside your own body. And then finally for displacement we have scrying, which doesn't need a cloth. This spell requires two identical name tags, one for a mob and one to drop on the circle. If you drop a name tag on top of the circle, you will temporarily be able to view the corresponding entity and its surroundings. Next category is projection. So the first projection spell is strengthening, which requires a cloth. This will strengthen items in your inventory. The durability of the item will heal and doesn't decrease for a few uses. You can mine one level above from the material's usual capabilities, so you can use regular sticks to mine stone and wood pickaxes to mine iron, etc, etc. Mining speed goes up a bit and you'll deal more damage when you hit stuff. They'll be using sticks and swords. Projectiles will have increased smacking damage but not increased projectile damage. It targets the first thing in your hotbar or your offhand slot. Then we have projection, which requires a cloth, and its first use will memorize a tool or item you're looking at. It could be something in someone else's hand, it could be on the ground or an item frame, and then the second use will give you a copy of that tool, however it'll only have 5 durability. Then we have the crimson black keys of proximity projection, which requires a cloth, and this will summon a weapon when you use it. This weapon teleports you to the thing you're attacking, and you can attack anything from far away. This is not recommended to do against creepers. Then we have the bow of weapon projectiles, which requires a cloth, and it'll summon a bow, which lets you shoot tools but not arrows. This lets you shoot diamond swords out of a bow to slay your enemies. Then we have the reality marble, which requires a cloth, and it'll teleport you and your target. If you don't have a target, it'll just teleport you to your reality marble. You'll be teleported to the same spot every time, and other people will have a different spot in the dimensions. There is a lot of swords here, and you can change it to prepare for victims. To leave, kill your target if you had one, then take damage. If you die, your items will be left there, but you'll be exited from the dimension. Next, we have power consolidation, which doesn't need a cloth. When you place this down, preferably far from your base, you'll spawn a large lake. Throw an enchanted sword into the lake and then go diving to get a new holier sword with damage equivalent to the sword you threw in, including its enchantments. This process can be repeated by re-enchanting the sword you received. When this sword is equipped, undead mobs will flee from you. Next, we have treasury projection, which requires a cloth. It will summon weapons from your treasury, meaning your inventory and ender chest, to pelt enemies with. You must have weapons in your inventory or ender chest for it to do anything. Use it by holding down right click on the gauntlet that the spell gives you. Next category is mystic. And the first one up is the damage replication spell, which does require a cloth. This applies damage and potion effects that happen to you to the thing that you use the spell on. Next is Ro-Ias, which does require a cloth, and it puts down a large pink shield, and when entities collide with it, they'll get bounced back a bit. Then we have one of my favorite spells of the whole mod, which is the Mystic Staff of Explosive Mana Condensation. This does require a cloth, and it'll give you a staff, which, upon holding right click, will summon a massive explosion wherever you target. You have to hold down right click a bit to charge it, and it'll turn the weather stormy and summon a huge beam from the heavens to strike down upon your target. If you hold shift right click, you can change the mode to a AoE attack mode, which summons small pink portals around you, and then when you let go of right click after charging it, they will pelt your whatever is in front of you with explosive laser beams. And then the final mode is the beam mode, which if you hold right click will summon a massive laser beam that causes huge destruction and sweeps through the whole earth, destroying everything that it touches except for bedrock. This is very expensive in terms of mana. Our next one is the Mystic Staff of Spatial Disorientation, which requires a cloth, and it will give you a staff. This staff can shoot entities really far away. You can aim at an entity to just throw that specific one, or you can aim at an empty block to throw everything near the block. Then we have Borrowed Authority, which requires a cloth. This spell will allow you to borrow the authority of the gods and whack stuff around for a little bit. You'll get massive speed, and every time you punch something, they'll get launched backwards and cause some destruction to the terrain around it. Next, we have the Cup of Heaven, which is a little complicated and has a whole video specifically explaining how it works just on the mod page. So you form some sort of polygon out of these circles without the cloth, then you can fill the polygon with nodes, once again without the cloth, and then finally you make a scroll with the cloth to activate the cup. Everything inside the external polygon will be affected. The caster must be within 30 blocks of a node to activate the cup, and the effects depend on how many nodes you put inside the polygon. Multiples of 2 stack poison, multiples of 3 add weakness, 5 blindness, 7 slowness, 11 wither, and 13 levitation. Effects will also be applied based on how many nodes are on the external polygon to a square, which has 4 nodes, which is 2 times 2. For the exterior will give you poison 2. Nodes must be within 20 blocks of each other to be counted as part of the networks. And for aesthetics, putting the circle farther down makes a bigger circle in the sky. Putting it above height 80 for a tiny circle. This is visual only. Next we have the mystic spells. So the first one is the Mystic Eyes of Binding. If you stare near people or mobs, their movement will be halted. They have to be facing you. If you personally are stuck in this, try looking away from the person casting the spell. Then we have the Mystic Eyes of Minor Clairvoyance, which lets you predict the movements of some entities. It doesn't work on angry skeletons when they strafe, and it can be a little finicky. But for the most part, it's a really cool effect. Then we have the Mystic Eyes of the Black Flame, which creates difficult to contain black flames at the target location. It causes wither damage to entities that contact it, and it spreads rapidly. You can quench it with rain or water if it gets out of control, and the rain will even work underground. Then we have the Mystic Eyes of Death Collection, which, when you watch things die, doesn't matter how, you collect their souls while the spell is active. For every full soul collected, your death can be prevented. Players give 1 soul by default, and mobs give 0.25 souls. Then we have the Mystic Eyes of Reversion, which you can stare near people or mobs to revert them to the way they should be. So potion effects are cleansed, buffs from the mod are cleansed, Endermen stop dodging arrows, shulker boxes can't block arrows, withers can't block arrows, nether mobs can burn, water mobs can drown, and husks can burn in the sunlight. Then we have the Mystic Eyes of Fey Sight, which allows you to see the Fey and ley lines. So, ley lines connect certain points throughout the world. They can only be seen with this spell. Being near a ley line or a ley point increases mana regeneration based on a percent of your max mana. The Fae also spawn near ley lines. Ley lines also boost Elytra, but it will only boost your reliability if you fly along the ley line, not across it. The Fae are spirit-like creatures which spawn near ley lines, as mentioned. Their laughter sounds like bells. They'll follow other living things and each other, and they drop Fae essence upon death. They can only be seen with a spell. They're also breedable by feeding them any powdered catalyst. Right-clicking with Fey Essence will place down a Fey Circle. Scrolls created with a Fey Circle can be useful by anyone as long as that person has mana. Unlike normal scrolls, they're not bound to the player. Stationary boundaries and other spells created with a Fey Circle can be claimed and used by anyone. And Fey Essence does not rely heavily on the user, allowing for potential automation of scroll creation through mechanical means. And our last mystic spell is the Mystic Eyes of Insight, which allows you to see the inventory of blocks or mobs, as well as the potion effects and main hand details for mobs. This is a really nice way to look at a chest at a glance to see if it contains what you need without opening it. Next we have familiar spells. Our first spell is Summon Familiar, which, as the name suggests, summons a familiar. This talks, wanders, and tells you what it sees or senses every so often. You can name it, however, it might die when you log off due to loneliness. Then we have Recall Familiar, which simply calls your familiar back to you. Next is Familiar Exchange, which lets you swap places with your familiar. And then we have Shared Vision, which lets you see whatever an entity or player sees. To get out of this vision, you can right-click and you can scroll to make sure that the hotbar is on something safe to right-click, as whenever you right-click will be used. And then finally, for the familiar spells, we have Familiar's Garden, which you use after summoning a familiar to create an area where everyone is friendly. This area moves with a familiar and expires after a short while. Then we have the Exchange spells. So the first of which is the Damage Exchange, which requires a cloth and turns any damage you take straight into mana. Then we have Chronal Exchange, which doesn't need a cloth. It gives you some mana per second half the day and takes away mana per second the other half the day. If you create this spell at 7 a.m., it'll give you mana between 1 a.m. and 1 p.m. and take away mana between 1 p.m. and 1 a.m. Mana generation is centered on the placement time, so plan accordingly. Then we have Durability Exchange, which doesn't require a cloth and converts durability on tools to mana. Drop the tools on top of the circle, it'll damage them and try and fill up your mana bar. You can also put a chest underneath the circle with tools in it. Then we have Catalyst Exchange, which once again doesn't need a cloth. This spell will randomly convert powdered catalyst you throw on it into other catalysts. If you don't have the materials, just throw the materials that you do have on it and hope you get lucky. Then we have Alchemical Exchange, which doesn't need a cloth. Every day at the time you place it, it'll convert certain blocks in a 5x5 area underneath it into other random blocks, usually of the same type. For example, stone may become other types of stone, and sand may become dirt, and vice versa. Then we have Contract, which doesn't require a cloth. If you create the circle and stand upon it, any players who are also standing on a contract circle nearby will form a contract with you, which allows them to pass through negative effects of boundaries and mystic eyes of binding. Then we have Immunity Exchange, which does require a cloth. This can be used on either yourself or an enemy you're looking at. The affected entity will not take damage from repeats of the same damage type, but takes double damage from new damage types. And then we have the only secret spell so far, which is Retribution. This spell requires a cloth, and it will allow you to swap health percentage with the target. The mana cost scales with the amount of health swapped. And now finally we're going to cover the newest type of magic, which was actually added in a very recent update. So every time a mob kills something, their Kodoku value goes up by 1, plus the Kodoku value of the mob they killed. When you have a mob with a high Kodoku value, right-click it with a hungry Kodoku worm and kill the mob. Right-click the worm to pick it up. The higher the Kodoku value of the worm, the more uses it has. When burned, they'll generate mana for any nearby mana circuits. The amount of mana generated depends on the proximity to a ley line. They can also be used for sympathetic magic. Sympathetic magic allows for a target to be remotely affected through a circle. For sympathetic magic, it must be scrying something and have an inventory underneath with Kodoku worms to act as fuel. The higher the Kodoku value, the higher the chance of the magic being successful. When a circle is active, throw items on it to apply various effects to your target. Blaze powder will set him on fire. Rabbit's foot will send him in the air. Splash potions will give you the effect of the potion. Glowstone dust will make it glow. Rotten flesh will give it hunger. Kodoku worms will give it misfortune. An ender pearl will teleport the target. However, players need a contract with the caster to be teleported. And nether warts will apply confusion. Misfortune applies various negative effects such as random lightning, dropping items, negative looting, tripping, breaking tools, and increased aggro. The chances scale with the quality of worm. So that's all we have for spells. Now we're going to go into some items and blocks. So we have the Mystic Code, which is an item that holds 3 stacks of scrolls. You can press shift right click to open the inventory, and you press Y, or whatever you change the keybind to switch between the scrolls. Press and hold right click to use the currently selected scroll. There is a variant of this called the Mystic Code for Sorcery, which has a set durability but also allows for the reuse of scrolls it contains. Then we have the Mana Circuits, which are blocks that store mana. This mana can be used by the player when they're nearby as long as the player owns the block. Whoever right-clicks a mana circuit after his first place is the one who owns it. Right-click a mana circuit to put mana into it, and shift right-click a mana circuit to turn it on or off. Scrolls and boundaries can use nearby mana circuits that belong to the player. Players can charge gems using nearby mana circuits that belong to them. There are 2 variants. By default, there is no benefit to using either. The only difference is aesthetics. They can be configured to have different storage capabilities. And then finally we have the Mahou Projector, which is a purely decorative block that lets you create magic circles for decorating your base. You can right-click the block to change the angle, color, rotation speed, whether a circle or ring show, etc., etc. There is a ton of customizability available with this block, and the base block is invisible, so you have to remember where you put it if you want to modify it or get rid of it. You can also load images from a URL. The steps to do so are on the Curse Forge page. And with that is going to cover every single thing that this mod adds. When I first saw this mod, I was simply blown away by the stunning visual effects and wide variety of spells that it added. I would highly recommend for you to download this for yourself. The link will be down in the description below. You can play with it on version 1.12.2 as well as 1.15.2. However, I believe 1.12.2 will be discontinued as 1.16 Forge is being worked on. This mod also has a Discord which you can join if you so wish. The link to that will be downloaded in the description below. Make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoy this type of content. And turn those notifications on so you don't miss any future videos. That's all we have. Peace out, everybody.